This week on London Real, we have UFC Cutman, Jacob Stitch Duran.
Chuck Liddell fought Wanderlei Silva. That fight, I just heard these guys cracking each other. I mean, and I'm thinking, you know what, these guys are gladiators. These guys are modern day gladiators. And I have something to do with that. When fighters fight, their souls touch. When I get in there, it's just me and that fighter. And it's one-on-one, and I've had fighters cry when I'm wrapping their hands. It's a father-son type of bond, and that's the way I look at these guys, is they are my children. When they're in the ring, I'm gonna take care of them just like I do my children. My birth certificate says CPC camp number 12 for the California Packing Company. The way I look at it is if you look good, you feel good, and you perform good. What I would tell Jacob, the 20-year-old Jacob, is follow your dreams, brother. They do come true.
London Real presents Jacob Stitch Duran, UFC Cutman.
Man, you know, I'm gonna die in the ring, brother.
Welcome back to London Real. I am Brian Rose. I'm reporting from the heart of East London. We are on Brick Lane, which is an area in Shoreditch known for all sorts of crazy stuff. There's been a history of immigration here for the past 1,000 years. I think it was the Flemish, and then the Bangladeshis, and then the Jews, and now we got tech people all over this area, and it's getting a little crazy. A lot of the real estate's going up in price. You got high-rise buildings behind me, and you know, it's an ever-changing city. We're also right next to the financial heart of London, so it's a crazy place to be. It's where our studios are located, and it's why it's so much goddamn fun around here. So I'm gonna walk you down Brick Lane. I highly encourage a visit if you ever come to London. As we stand in front of this bus, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our guest this week. His name is Jacob Stitch Duran, and he is the main cutman for the UFC, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He also is always in the corner of heavyweight boxers, the Klitschko Brothers. He knows them very well. They insist on him being there, and there's a reason for it, and that's because he's the best in the business. He's also been in movies with Sylvester Stallone, Woody Harrelson, and you know, it's funny, he is a celebrity cutman, if that really means anything, because a lot of people probably don't even know what a cutman is, but if you've ever watched the UFC, you know him. He's got this signature boss playa mustache. He's got glasses, his shirt is always pressed, and he's always taking care of business inside the Octagon, and basically Stitch has about 55 seconds in between rounds to stop the bleeding and stop the trauma that a boxer or a UFC fighter suffers when they're in the ring or in the cage. And a lot can be done in that 55 seconds, and you can screw it up as well. And so that's why you need guys that know what they're doing, and you need people with experience. And it's more than that. You know, Stitch has a kind of a calming way about him to give confidence to the fighters and give confidence to the corners. And he's like part psychologist, you know, part doctor, part trainer, all rolled up into one. You know, Stitch has a kickboxing background. He's got a fascinating story. So that's why I encourage you, if you're not a fight fan, you need to listen to this story, because it's not really about fighters or combat. It's about just an extraordinary tale of this man. He was born, and his birth certificate says, I believe it's the California Packing Company on his birth certificate, because he was part of a migrant labor camp, which in California was a group of, you know, very typically Mexican Americans. He is a Mexican guy, and they would go from camp to camp as a family and pick crops. And so when he was 5 years old, he was in the fields taking care of business. And so his birth certificate has the name of the company that he actually worked for. You know, from there, Stitch went to the Air Force. He went to Thailand, fell in love with Thai boxing. Who doesn't fall in love with Thai boxing? I know I did. And he came back and started the American Kickboxing School in America. Then he found himself working for RJR Reynolds, and had a company car and everything, and packed it all in to go to Vegas and really pursue his dream and love, when that was to become a cutman. And when Dana White called in 2002, you know, Stitch became kind of the man, and now you see him everywhere. And he doesn't just fix cuts on guys, he actually wraps their hands as well. And I released a short video a couple days ago where he wrapped my hand, and I got a little giddy when he did it. While he's wrapping your hand, he's calming you down, and he's making you feel good about your fight, and trying to get guys to relax, because there was a big fighter named Frank Mir, and he said when he sees Stitch coming, he knows he's about to fight, and his stomach kind of drops out, because that's when you know it's on. When you're a fighter, when you see Stitch, you know you're going to get your hands wrapped, and you're going to go out there and fight for your life in the cage of the ring. So he's got a fantastic story. I hope you guys enjoy it. Stitch is kind of like the cool uncle you never had. He's the guy that is the sweetest guy in the world, but could probably drop you in a single shot if he wanted to. And he's got some crazy stories. I would have tried to tell them now, but I'll save them for the video. They're pretty extraordinary, and you know what? He's a pretty extraordinary dude. So hope you enjoy Stitch Duran. As you probably know, we are sponsored by the folks at Bulletproof. These guys make a mean coffee that's free of molds and toxins that I'm drinking every day. I serve to Stitch. It was Stitch's first bulletproof coffee, and they also do a lot of other things when it comes to, I guess you could call it biohacking, or doing better things with your body. And you probably remember the sleep hacking series that we're doing right now. There's a video, I'm probably playing it right now, you can click on and get some free tips and 2 free apps to hack your sleep. And these guys are big into that, and a lot of other things they got going on, different products just to make you be a better person. So please check them out. They support the show, and we're big fans. You can go to their blog, which is bulletproofexec.com, or go to upgradedself.com and pick up some of those products. I recommend the coffee. The sleep induction mat is fantastic. You can actually download a free infographic right here and get all the tips about your sleep. So check them out. The party continues. We are on Brick Lane as we speak. If you want to get in touch with us at London Real, we're on Twitter at London Real TV. Send me a message at brian@londonreal.tv. If you haven't followed our parallel or sister show, it's called Silicon Reel, which is about the London technology community here. We've got the head of Google campus on today, and a lot of times I think these guests would be just as good on London Real. It's just I happen to do this tech show, so we keep them just for tech. But they're great stories, fascinating people. So come check that out. It's a separate podcast on iTunes, on the YouTube channel. It's on the same channel, and you can just check out siliconreal.com to do that. And boom, there you go. We got Mr. Rao Reynolds, who is the lead singer for Enter Shikari on next week. And he's a very cool dude. He's a proper rock star, and but also really a fascinating guy. And every single song they produce has a real message to it. And he had just spoke at the Zeitgeist Day, Z-Day, about the role of artists. And he's got a fantastic take on. He's kind of you take one of these guys with a message like in the 70s, and then you accelerate him 40 years forward, and he's kind of like that guy, like the new age rock star. So I think you really enjoy him, and I hope you've enjoyed this tour of Brick Lane. It's a little quiet on a Friday afternoon, but it'll get rocking this weekend for sure. And until then, I leave you with Mr. Stitch Duran, the UFC Cutman. Okay, shall we do this?
Let's do it, brother.
All right, here we go.
All right.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. We are sponsored today by the folks at Bulletproof Coffee, which Stitch and I are both sipping on right now. It's a coffee that's free of molds and toxins. You put some grass-fed butter in there, some MCT oil, and bam, you got this frothy brew that is keeping us awake right now, especially if you got a little jet lag. It might keep you awake right now. So thanks to those guys. You can check them out. It's a Bulletproof Executive. They've got sleep hacks, coffee, you name it. So appreciate those guys for supporting the show. My guest today is Mr. Jacob Stitch Duran, who is the most famous UFC and boxing cutman in the business. You grew up in a migrant camp in California. You started working at 5 years of age. Later, you joined the Air Force. You went to Thailand. You fell in love with Muay Thai kickboxing. You came back to the States. I think you started your own school. You later became a cutman. I'm just going to blow through your biography really quick here. In 2001, you joined the UFC. UFC. You have appeared in every single season of the Ultimate Fighter reality show. You've been in the movies with Sylvester Stallone, Antonio Banderas, Woody Harrelson. You've written your book, From the Fields to the Garden, The Life of Stitch Duran. In boxing, the Klitschko Brothers pretty much have you, I think, at all of their fights.
Right.
They fly you in for that. It seems like you're at every single UFC I ever watch. Stitch, welcome to London Real.
Hey, Brian, thanks, man. What an introduction.
You like
I tell
that?
you what, yeah, what more can I say?
Right, interview's over, right?
I love that, man. But you know what? I want to thank Bulletproof because, I just got off the plane and came straight over here, and I was a little jet lagged. But now, baby, let's roll.
Dude, that is all good. We almost missed you with the car at the hotel, and I was like, I don't know if Stitch might want to pass, and you were like, let's go, man.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being here.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure. Really, it is.
I'm curious, before we get into your story, which is a crazy one, what's it like when you land in Heathrow Airport and you come to London? Do you remember the first time you were here, and what do you think about when you think of London, England?
Yeah, well, you know what? The first time I was here in London was when we did the UFC fights at the Albert Hall.
Okay,
Center.
2002, my first UFC.
Yeah,
ever.
and that's when the UFC was first getting going, and it was somewhat of an experience, and I had a great time, and it was really just the start of what the UFC was doing, and you look back at that day now to where we are now, and we've grown in leaps and bounds, and I'm glad to be on this carpet ride.
Yeah, it was an amazing show. That Royal Albert Hall is like over 100 years old.
Yeah.
They have operas and ballets in there, and then they had an octagon. It was like the most surreal thing for me to be there for that. But that was my first time. I'd never really seen anything. I think there was Matt Hughes and Carlos Newton, I think, had fought for the second time, and there was something crazy. And I remember Frank Mir fought Ian Freeman, got knocked out, and yeah, that was intense. That's 12 years ago. Yeah,
and Josh Barnett, that's where I met Josh Barnett, and from there we became good friends. I worked with him in Pride, and that was just the start of many, many things that happened to me in my career.
And you are all over the world. I mean, you've been to Europe countless times. Yeah. You go to Germany for the Klitschkos. They usually fight in Germany, right? And so Europe, you're no stranger to Europe.
No, they, you know what, and you were talking about coming to London, it's nice when the customs guys acknowledge you, and they do. They did that in Brazil, and obviously they did that in London today, actually.
Did they?
And in Germany, people stop me in the streets and all that, and to me, it's quite a mind blowing experience. I'm a cut man, and to get those kind of accolades and that kind of recognition, I'm happy.
Do you ever feel like you could go out incognito and you kind of don't want to be bothered? Or how do you feel when what do they say to you?
Well, they stop me. Hey, you're Stitch. One guy says, hey, anybody ever tell you look like Stitch? I said, you know what? I hear that all the time. and I let him on for about 3-4 minutes, and my wife's kind of, you got to let him know, so I am Stitch, and but no, you know what? It's a very gratifying feeling, to be recognized in something as big as this, and like say I come from very humble background, and I always look back and thinking, wow, here's a little kid from the migrant camps in Planada, California, as a farm worker. I'm traveling the world. I'm doing London Real here with Brian Rose, and it keeps me in check, man.
Take me back to where you grew up, and you told me about your birth certificate earlier. What does it say on your birth certificate?
Yeah, it's a trip. I'll talk to people and I'll say, what, who do you know pick cotton? I pick cotton. I grew up as a farm worker. My parents were migrant workers, and I was. My birth certificate says CPC Camp Number 12 for the California Packing Company, and we were in Camp Number 12. And but yeah, you're right. I mean, I was born and raised in doing farm work, and that has really educated me on being a hard worker, being on time, respecting people, because when you come down from the bottom, the only way to go is up. But I never forget those moments, and I'm glad I went through those stages.
Is that something you look back fondly, or is it look back as kind of a traumatic time in your life?
Oh no, hey, listen, buddy, I'm proud of it, man. And the thing about it, everybody I grew up with grew up poor, so we didn't know we were poor. But we had all the fruits, all the vegetables, we were all pretty athletic because you're running through the fields, and they plow the fields, and you have layers of rows, and you step on certain parts of the rows, and that gave us pretty good coordination, and but my goal was always to be a professional baseball player, and picking nectarines or picking tomatoes, I would throw them at boxes. I would throw them up and hit them with a stick, and even we had our driveway that was all rocks, a bunch of little rocks, and I'd get a little like a broom and throw the rocks up and hit them, bam. So I had pretty good eye and hand coordination. But no, it's I'm proud of coming from there, and I traveled the world, and you get all these Latino people that come up to me. I just saw a girl from Chile that took a picture with me today, and she just says, I'm just so proud, that you're representing us, and I do. I represent the raza and the Latinos. And my first time to Stockholm, Sweden, when Alexander Gustafsson fought, I go into the weigh-ins, and you know how the weigh-ins, there's 5,000 people that show up, right? Well, the first guy to ask me for an autograph is this Chicano from East LA. And I look and I laugh, and I'm thinking, what are you doing here? But he was there for school, education. So I see this young generation growing, and if I could give them a little bit of confidence in saying, follow your dreams, they do come true, then I've done my job in that.
I remember seeing Cain Velasquez kind of rode to the Octagon, and they were showing his father, who I think worked a lot in the fields, and they were saying that he was really a grinder, working those long hours, and then they said that's basically what Cain does, and that's basically what the fighters do,
right.
And I think that's probably something you see, but the average spectator, they just see the glory, but they don't see those days every day in the gym, those 8-10 hours a day, where it really is a grind at the end of the day.
Yeah, Brian, I have so much respect for these fighters. I mean, I've done hundreds, probably thousands of fights right at ringside, and I look at these guys, whether you could be a world champion or whether you could be your first fight, but these guys, for them to do what they do, to me is quite inspirational. I mean, I hear these guys crack each other. I remember when Chuck Liddell fought Wanderlei Silva. That fight, I just heard these guys cracking each other. I mean, and I'm thinking, you know what, these guys are gladiators. These guys are modern day gladiators. And I have something to do with that. My job when I walk into the dressing room is they assign me a fighter, I'll wrap their hands, and in this instance with Chuck and Wanderlei, it was Wanderlei's, I wrapped Wanderlei's hands. And, but what made this a nice story is about a week before I was telling them that, I wish them good luck. That's my birthday that day, December the 29th, when they fought. And I was working in Chuck's corner. But after that fight, I mean, Wanderlei is swelled up, and I mean, they're just going toe to toe, man. And I go and clean up Chuck. He had a small cut, cleaned him up and all that. So I went over there to my buddy Wanderlei, and I said, Wanderlei, how you doing? How you feel? He goes, no, I'm okay. Stitch, happy birthday. I said, man, you know what?
This is after the fight.
This is right in the ring.
In the ring.
Right in the ring. Leon Tabbs is cleaning him up and all that, and he's swollen. He looked like the Elephant Man. And I'm thinking, this guy just went through the hardest fight of his life, and he's wishing me a happy birthday. But that's the kind of respect I think that, these guys are giving me. It's and it's because I give them a lot of respect, and I think I give them a lot of, I bring their confidence level up. And I'm like the guy in the old gladiator days, and I always mention that, where they're in the dungeon and they're starting to put their armor on before they go out to the Coliseum and fight for death, right? While me putting the hand wraps on is really the same thing. It's just done in modern times. So I'm the first step of them getting ready to go and fight. Frank Mir probably said it best, and he says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, my stomach just drops because I know it's time to fight. And and I think that's a very true statement. Vitor Belfort, another great comment that he says is, when Stitch comes into the dressing room, whether he's working my corner or not, he brings that calming effect. And, if you've never been in the dressing room and seen these guys prepare for battle, it's hard to really imagine that. If you're a fighter, I think you can really appreciate what I bring to the table.
What is it like for someone who's never been there and can only imagine? Is it a fairly similar feeling at every wrap, at every fight?
Yeah, you know what? And when you have a young fighter, a guy that's coming into the UFC for the first time, Diego Brandao, when we did the reality show, he was the first guy I was going to wrap, and there's 32 fighters, 16 fights. So there's a whole bunch of guys we got to wrap, but Diego Brandao was the first guy, and I didn't know who he was. I'm starting to wrap his hands, and he goes, Stitch, I was telling my girlfriend that one of these days, that guy with a mustache and glasses is going to be wrapping my hands, and I was wrapping his hands as he's telling me that, and he gave me chills, and I got chills right now just talking about it. He ended up winning the reality show,
And you still get chills.
and I still get chills. I got chills just talking to you right now. It's you have to be there, man. It's that intertwine that I bring with these guys. It's really special.
And you're the last contact they pretty much have before they go in there, or you're a very long, because it takes, 7 minutes a hand to wrap those hands?
Yeah, for me it does.
For you, okay.
You do your homework pretty well.
Yeah, a little
I'm
bit.
impressed, brother.
A little bit. But, they spend that time with you, and it's almost it's a quiet time, it's a meditative time, but you guys are sharing quite a moment together, and they're not with their camp, who they've been spending probably 24/7 with for the last how many days, and it must be a kind of a weird, cathartic, I don't know, spiritual moment.
It is. It is really a spiritual moment. I think I've never heard that statement before, but I think you're right on point on saying that. And because, when I get in there to start rapping, and you're right, these guys are with their camps 7-8 weeks and all that. But when I get in there, it's just me and that fighter. And it's one-on-one, and I've had fighters cry when I'm wrapping their hands because I know that anxiety is in them, and my job is to take that away from them and give them that point of confidence, and it's like, outside of being a good cut man and wrapping hands and working cuts, psychology is a big issue, and I'm very good at that, and I know when Miesha Tate fought Ronda Rousey, Brian Calloway, they had another guy wrapping Misha's hands, but they wanted me to wrap them. And he comes up to me and says, Stitch, look, the reason I want you to wrap her hands is because that psychology that you give her right before she goes out. And the way I look at it, Brian, is if I could give you 1 ounce of confidence, that 1 ounce might be that 1 ounce it takes for you to go out there and win a fight. And so I feel very treasured in having those moments with these fighters.
And what do you say to someone when they're crying like that? I mean, I'm sure you have a very gentle hand, and I'm sure you're a man of few words, but the right words.
Yeah.
What do you do, or is it sometimes just a touch?
Yeah, it's both. It's and this one fighter specific, he just literally, I'm starting to wrap his hands, and I could kind of feel the tension in him, and then he just starts crying like a baby, and I just sat back, and they didn't go through that moment. And then that's where that touch came in. I said, well, you know what? Don't worry about it, brother. I'm here to take care of you, man, and let's get this done. He ended up winning the fight.
And that's the thing. The margins are so thin at this level that it's just the psychological edge can make such a big difference on these fights. I mean, you look at the Vegas odds, it might say plus or minus 300, but anyone who's watched the UFC, we know it's just down to who pushes it a little bit more. It could be a matter of a few seconds who wins that fight, right?
It's a matter of seconds, and that's it, man, and inches, and that's it. And it is. It's that psychological thing, and it isn't very important, and I know Carol Parisian, when he fought Drew Fickett, this was at the Marine base years ago, he ended up with a big old gash right on his cheek, and the referee called the timeout, and they bring the doctor in, but Carol's looking at the big screen, and he goes like this, and the gash just opens up, and he freaks out. I
remember that, yeah.
Yeah, he starts freaking out, and Manny Gambarian and Neil were their coaches, and I didn't know who Manny was at that time, but these two guys went into shell shock. They didn't know what to do. Carol wants to stop the fight. Manny and Neil don't know what to do, and my job's not to give instructions. But I knew at this point that it wouldn't have been fair for Carol for these guys to have stopped the fight because, these guys weren't very, very experienced. I took it upon myself. I told Carol, I said, look, man, don't worry about the cut. I'm going to have that taken care of. You just go out there and you just fight him in a stand-up position. And he did. He ended up winning the fight. But the side note to that is a couple fights later, we're at the MGM, and I'm walking by, and Carol is sitting there with his father. And, I'm traditional Mexican. Carol and his father are traditional Armenians, and he introduces me. I said, well, how's the cut? So you can see the scar, and he introduces me to his father, and his father says, I want to thank you for taking care of my son. I want to invite you to my house for dinner. And once again, those are those chill moments, and we've never had that opportunity. But that wasn't the point. The point is that he extended himself out to me for taking care of his son. And, those great moments, man.
And that still honors you, those little moments of respect.
Big time.
I guess that's why you're still doing what you do. Because a lot of people, they wouldn't. They would just, it would be another fight, another fighter. A lot of those guys would just see the same face every time.
Yeah.
No.
It's every fight has a different story, brother. And when you think you've seen it all, you haven't seen it all. And I've always, here's what I've wanted to present to the UFC. Maybe you could present it, or maybe the fans could present it. Is the fans have to see what we do backstage. But there's so many contests that the UFC has for the fan clubs or whatever. But maybe they ought to have a cut man of the night, where whoever wins the contest gets to hang out with me and goes into the dressing room and see these moments of me wrapping these guys' hands, sitting next to me at ringside and see what goes on between the relationship of me and the trainers and the fighter and the referees and the doctors. Those are very special moments, and those are stories that go untold, but I think they're very important in the game.
You said your greatest asset is confidence.
Yes.
And it sounds like when you're in there, like for example with Caro in his corner, if you didn't exude that confidence, they could have gone any number of ways.
Oh, they would have stopped the fight.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Caro, he wanted to stop the fight. And if I wouldn't have stepped in, they would have stopped the fight. He would have lost it.
So your confidence allows them to worry about what they need to be worrying about,
Absolutely.
Which is game plan, the fight, recovering, all that stuff.
Yeah. Listen, I put that whole swab in that cut. It was that big. And for me to tell him not to worry about it, he didn't worry about it. So it worked.
Do you ever, you've probably never been asked this question, but all of the trauma and, all of the, I don't know if I'd call it violence, but all of the fighting going on, and I know you have the utmost respect for these guys and what they're doing. Does it ever bother you that the fact that these guys are literally throwing their bones at each other, like you said with Chuck and Vanderlei, and they're cracking away, and you watch this every weekend and you're a part of it? Does it ever get to you?
No, it doesn't. It just gives me more respect for these guys. I mean, only because of what they're doing. And, you're talking about the long training process, the injuries that go in the training process, the mental game, the drying out. I mean, I've seen guys just, going through the syndromes of drying out, and it's a tough job, man. Really, the fight is probably the easiest thing that these guys go through. But when they're out there, cracking each other, and then at the end of the fight, they're hugging each other. To me, that's quite special. It's a sport.
Right. Yeah, I guess it is something noble about it in the moment when they're just given everything. And then, like you said, especially in MMA, at the end, you get the hug.
Yeah.
Which you don't always see in boxing.
No, you don't see in boxing all the time, that's for sure.
Yeah, but we're going to get to that. So your job, for people that are, we're going to make this documentary about you guys, definitely. It's behind the scenes wrapping the hands beforehand. Then when they go out to the ring, you put the Vaseline on them before they go in. Right? And you usually whisper something into their ear. Is that, everyone's always wanted to know what that is. Does that change with certain fighters? Is it something the same? I think there's a story where you said you were looking out for a fighter, for his mother.
Yeah, well, that was Clay Guida.
Okay. And that's a tricky time there, because if you say the wrong thing in their ear, they could go in there in a really weird way, right?
Right. Clay Guida's mom, she's a doll. Mom and dad are dolls. Clay Guida's a great guy, and once again they say, take care of my son, take care of my son. Here's what 9 out of 10 times, probably 98% out of 100 times, here's what I'm telling the guys is hug your team, take your clothes off, hug your team. I'm going to put Vaseline on you. The referee's going to check you. And I have to get close to the ear because it's so loud that from here to here, they're not going to be able to hear it. And then not only that, but their attention span, like Jose Aldo, he's jumping around like a Mexican jumping bean. So I have to really, the only way to focus on them at that point, and even when they get knocked out, is to whisper in their ear and to let them know, especially when they get knocked out, that there's a Stitch talking to you. But Clay Guida, I told him, I said, look, man, your mom said for me to take care of you. And he says, you always do. Yeah.
That's a powerful moment.
Powerful moment.
So on top of that, you put the Vaseline on before they go in. Then in between rounds, you are tending to their cuts, which are pretty much on the face. And then the last part of that job is if somebody gets knocked out, a lot of times they're waking up to you.
Right.
Those are very powerful moments, probably.
Yeah, those are pretty crazy moments, and I've been through enough of these situations where there's been times where the doctors have tried to get to the fighters when they're knocked out. And, you know, you have to realize when these guys get knocked out, they're thinking so many different things, or they're probably not even thinking anything at all. It's just instincts are kicking in. So when you see me whisper to these guys during a time when they're knocked out, I'm saying, this is Stitch. I'm here to take care of you. And Ivan Drago, it was funny, when he got knocked out by Mike Brown, the doctors are trying to get him composed and this and that, and he's kind of rustling them and this and that. And I get him, I said, Drago, look at me, this is Stitch. You got knocked out. And he says, Stitch, you I believe. You know? And but there's guys, Michael Bisping when he got knocked out by Dan Henderson. There's Miguel Torres when he got knocked out. When these guys get knocked out, there's usually like 3 times I have to mention it to them for them to register that, boom, I did get knocked out.
So you need to tell them what's going on right now.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, because they have to understand, but when they understand, you could just feel their body relax a little bit. Like, Anderson Silva, when he got knocked out by Chris Weidman. He's there, and I have to tell him, and, I'm on my knees, he's sitting down on his butt, and we're in the middle of the ring, and I'm telling him he got knocked out, and it took 2 times. The second time, he just kind of accepted it. And you have to accept it. It happens in this game, and nobody is vulnerable. Or everybody's vulnerable, I should say.
Do you feel bad when you have to see a guy, that has worked so hard, you just wrapped his hands an hour before, and, their whole, title is gone, and then they have to wait there for the ref, and is that break your heart, or are you so used to it that that's just part of the game, and there has to be a winner and a loser?
No, I try to stay level all the time, but there's been moments. Obviously, there's always emotional moments. And Shogun, when he got tapped out by Chael, it was so quick that I could just see major disappointment in Shogun. Like, God, my whole life just ended. I got tapped out by Chael.
Yeah, by Chael, not even by a jiu-jitsu specialist. Right?
Anderson Silva, when he had his leg broken. An hour before, I was in the dressing room wrapping his hands. Roy Jones is in the dressing room. We're talking, we're joking around, and to see such a horrible accident like that, it kind of hurt.
But I guess you don't want to show that. You just want to stay calm and make them feel better, and just kind of move on to the next fight.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is stuff I tell my wife.
Right.
I don't leave that. I don't leave that in the ring or in the dressing room.
Okay. And the middle part that I skipped is this in between rounds. This is where you actually do your work as a cut man. And the term cut man, your nickname is Stitch, but you don't do any stitching. No. Somebody asked me that today. They're obviously not a UFC a fan, but what are you trying to do in that 60 seconds between rounds? And what are the tools that you have? And why do we see only you? And let's be honest, guys that are not young in there. These are experienced. The team that you have, I think it's 4 guys per UFC. Why do we need you guys to do it?
Well, I think we're pretty good at what we do, and but the thing about it, when a fighter, let's talk about a cut. When a fighter gets cut, our job is to give him every opportunity to win a fight. And there's medications that we use, adrenaline chloride 1/1000. That's a vessel constrictor. That's like, as Dr. Davidson says, that's like bending a hose. That's what we use on the swab that goes into the cut, and that closes up the blood vessels. I have a new product called Quick Aid that literally dehydrates the blood. But our job is, basically, we have 55 seconds, if you could still a second or two, to stop the bleeding, man. And send that guy out nice and clean, like nothing ever happened, because that could be very influential on not only the doctors, but the referees and the judges. And to go out there, it's like a pit stop, man. A race car driver. You come in, boom, you can do what you got to do. You clean them up, you send them out. And, when it comes to swelling, you just want to maintain that swelling and send them out there, and give them every opportunity to win the round. Go in that one more round.
Right. You want to give them that one more. No one wants to see a fight stopped on cuts, right?
No, exactly.
The fighters don't. Even the winner doesn't want to see that, does he? And the fans don't either.
Yeah. Yeah. But in all fairness, if and doctors have asked me, what do you think about the cut? And, the bottom line is let's save these guys for the next time. If it's real bad where it could be doing some nerve damage or some optical damage or something like that, then, let's stop that fight and let's take care of this guy and let him get better and let him come back and win a fight later on.
So the doctors will ask you your opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of nice when you go into different commissions, and especially commissions where we don't go to often. I know I feel pretty honored when the doctors want to take pictures with me. At that point, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to let me do my work. But usually about 30 minutes before the fight start, I'll go to the ringside and I'll meet the doctors and I'll let them know, here's what we do. Obviously the doctor has the decision to stop the fight, and I'm not going to question it. But give us the opportunity to give this guy every chance to win a fight, and they understand that.
When I see the doctor examine those guys sometimes it just seems like a crapshoot, or I'm like, does this guy really know what he's looking for? And sometimes it really just seems almost like a part of the drama. Let's take a look, and obviously most of the time they don't. That's a really weird process.
Yeah, and does
a doctor know? I mean, a doctor might be a doctor, but does he know what's a bad cut, what's a good cut?
Well, it depends on where you're at, believe it or not. And like say, if you go to a weak commission, then you get these doctors that don't work fights all the time, or one guy might be a general practitioner, another guy might be a podiatrist. One guy, we're doing some fights and guys got cut and says, well, Stitch, do you think you need stitches? That happened twice, and that's what kind of doctor are you? So I'm a cardiologist. If the guy has a heart attack, I'll be okay, but I know nothing about this, but it depends on where you go, and that's why sometimes I have to take it upon myself, to kind of not take their role, but at least guide them through that process. And I know when Crow Cop got knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga, remember that?
Yeah.
And Crow Cop was just snoring, and he was locked up, and it sounded like he was snoring. But I had seen that before, and I had worked with the doctors in Nevada. Nevada doctors are the best, and I've learned so much off of them. But at that point, they want to take the mouthpiece off, and that's not the thing. As long as he's breathing, let that mouthpiece stay in there, and eventually their bodies will relax, and Crow Cop did relax, and then you could actually take that mouthpiece off. But a lot of guys right off the bat, they want to take that mouthpiece off.
Right, which is the wrong call.
Right.
Yeah. And the doctors that are watching these things, they will they kind of defer to you sometimes if you can kind of feel. I mean, can you see them sometimes kind of look to you, or just kind of look at this and not know exactly what they're going to do, or does it really vary by the commission?
Well, their job is not to do anything. Their job is, when I'm working on a cut, is to observe and to make a determination whether the fight could continue or not. And but doctors will ask me, Stitch, what do you think? I said, no, you know what? I got this one under control.
Okay.
And so we do work together and communicate together, and I feel proud that I want to have a high school diploma, man. People call me, but you know what? I want to have a high school diploma, not because I was dumb. It just, I walked down to college to play baseball, but I lived in a town 9 miles away from the college, and going to school was easy because all my friends went to school, but staying for practice, everybody went home, so I would have to walk or try to hustle a ride or something like that. So that's, I couldn't do that. But when doctors ask me questions like that, I feel pretty honored, man.
How did you get into this racket? I know you spent some time with the Air Force, and you went to Thailand.
Yeah.
You said that was at the end of the Vietnam War?
Yeah, it was in 74 to 75. I was stationed in Thailand, and that's when Saigon was falling, and we were there. I was at the base that had the B-52s, where they would load them up, go to Nam, drop the bombs, and come right back. And so our job was to protect the B-52s and the bomb dumps and what have you not. And I always wanted to. I didn't even know what Thailand was, brother. I knew what Korea was. And when I got in the military, I always wanted to study the martial arts. And obviously Korea was Taekwondo. But when I got to Thailand, some friends were already stationed there like 3 months before, so they're already acclimated. So I went to go see my first Muay Thai fight in downtown Banchan. And I see this guy get kicked in the neck, man, and gets knocked out. And I think That's what I want to do.
You want to do that. You've
So
probably
that-
just seen boxing
Yeah,
before
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. So the following Monday they had Taekwondo on the base, and it was then it was run by the Koreans. But when I got there, the Koreans had left, and the Thais had taken it over. It was still Taekwondo, but then they converted it into the Muay Thai system, and I studied there, and that's what got me going where I'm at now.
And then you came back to the States, started, what is it, ASK?
ASK. Well, before that, though, when I got back to the States, I worked for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company in Oakland. And, once again, it was funny. I joined a college. I joined Alameda College because they had Taekwondo classes. It was free. And so me and my buddy went, and I went in as a white belt, right? And these instructors, they lined everybody up in the circle, and they started sparring with each one of these guys and just beating the crap out of them. And it just happened to be I was like the last guy on the list. And when I got there, and I'm a white belt, right? I just whooped on this black belt, man, just ate him up. Everything I did, I just picked him apart. And I sat down, and the girl that was sitting next to me, she goes, I was going to quit because I just didn't see no benefit in this, but I'm staying. So about 2-3 months later, I'm pumping gas, and who drives up to get gas is that same instructor. So he came and asked me, he says, man, where'd you study at? So when I told him I was in Thailand, it's like a big rock just came off his shoulders because he thought, okay, I just couldn't understand why this guy was whooping on me. Everything I did, I connected. And everything he did, he didn't. So I kind of humbled him a little bit for, taking advantage of these poor guys that didn't know what they were doing. And but I got into boxing to improve my hands. And then from there, I opened up my own school, ASK, the American School of Kickboxing. I show you how crazy I was, Brian. I did it with a credit card, man. I worked with R.J. Reynolds, and one of my accounts had a building. It was a store. It was a convenience store, and he downsized, and half the building was open, and he presented it to me, and I didn't have no money, so he gave me the first rent free, and I went and I opened up the whole school with my credit card. I had painted it, got some equipment, got the carpets, got the mirrors, and people had already known me because I was already training fighters. So I was already recognized in Solano County as the top trainer for kickboxing.
Did you ever fight yourself?
Well, you know what? I never had that opportunity because when I got back, I did some. In Thailand, the Thais would call me Bruce Lee. I'd be walking back to the G, and all the cab drivers would challenge me, and my instructor, the Thai guards, would come and they would want to spar. So I did a lot of sparring with a lot of Thais. But when I got back, kickboxing was just pretty much non-existent. It was PKA, but those were in areas I didn't even know. But I had a corporate America job. I was with R.J. Reynolds, and that's what I did, and I knew nothing about all that. I joined some karate tournaments and whooped the shit out of everybody, But that was it, But that's why I got into boxing, and I started training amateur boxers, and from there I improved my style of American kickboxing, and the fighters that I had turned out to be some great fighters.
And people don't know about you. You're working at R.J. Reynolds, company car. You're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And you packed it all up and moved to Vegas to become a professional cut man, right?
Yeah, I followed my dreams.
You say follow your dreams. How did you make that decision?
That was crazy. I always wanted to move to Vegas. I was at the top of the level in kickboxing. I went all over the world and worked with a lot of great fighters, but championship fights were like $5,000,
Okay.
And so there.
As a trainer or a cut man?
No, as a fighter.
As a fighter. Okay, right.
No, these guys were.
And you were their trainer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a trainer, cut man, manager. I did them all,
Okay.
and but I was good at what I did, and I had done some boxing, and work fights in Vegas and worked with other fighters, but I wanted to go with the big boys, so I put in for a job transfer with R.J. Reynolds, and I waited for about a year, and finally I get a call, and they say, look, there's an opening in downtown Las Vegas. You don't have to do no traveling, but you got to be there in a week. And I kind of, no, excuse me. And I kind of, you're taking that one out, right?
Yeah.
it's bulletproof, man.
It'll show that you're human,
Yeah, that was bulletproof. Anyway, so, they tell me I have to be there in a week. And I kind of knew it was coming because the company was downsizing. And I couldn't do it in a week, man. So I called the manager in Las Vegas, and I gave him my story, and I said, well, look, we need somebody here quick. Yes, we'll give you 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I transferred my school to one of my students. I sold my house, and I moved my family, and I took like a $25,000 a year cut and pay just to get the position that was open, which was a lower position than what I had. I called my mother up and said, "Oh, Mom, by the way, I got a new phone number. It's in Las Vegas, and it happened that quick."
And you were doing RJ Reynolds, and you were starting to do Cutman work there.
Yeah, I was I was working with RJ Reynolds over there. One thing when I first came into boxing, Cornelius Boza Edwards, that was a world champion from England, from London actually, he told me, he said, Stitch, there's three things that you need to make it successful. You need a job, a place to stay, and a car. And those things I always had. And so I did. I worked with RJ Reynolds, and I worked fights and all that, and got to the point where I was doing more fights than I was working with RJ Reynolds. Actually, when I left RJ Reynolds, I took a buyout, and then I worked for Trepco, which was a wholesale company selling groceries to the stores and all that. But it got to the point where I was traveling more than working, and the guy Al Paulus was very nice and says, "You know what, thank you for everything, but maybe you ought to just do that full time."
When did you first meet Dana White?
Oh God, you know what? Dana and I and Don House were in the gyms. We're training fighters. And this is before the UFC, even the second UFC, the Dana White UFC came. And I quit watching the old one because it was just too brutal for me. Being a martial artist, it was brutal, and there was the only rules basically where there were no rules. And but I was in the gyms training boxers. Dana was training fighters. Don House was training fighters. And I used to sell boxing equipment. And I used to sell Dana equipment and all that. So that's how I knew Dana, in the gyms. And, we're at the point at that time when, wives would say, "You know what? You got to get another job because this isn't paying the bills." And I'm sure Dana went through that same process because
the voice of reason, right?
Yeah, the voice of reason, because everybody in that system doesn't make money. And but I hadn't seen Dana for about a year, and I was working at K1 at the Bellagio, and I see Dana in the audience, and he asked me for my card, and he calls me up the next day and said, "Look, man, we bought the UFC. You want to be a cut man?" And he changed my life, man.
And then you joined the UFC. I remember an old interview you gave where people were saying, "How do I become a cut man?" And I think you said, "Look, you got to put your time in. Yeah. You got to go visit the gyms." And it sounds like your business, like any really good business, is about relationships, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, no, absolutely relationships, because, you can spend all the time in the gym. And that's what I tell. I get emails all the time. People ask me, they'll ask me tomorrow at the fight, "I want to be a cut man. I'm a nurse. I'm a paramedic. What does it take to be a cut man?" Well, you know what? You have all those things, but unless you're in the gym, doing what these fighters do, understanding what these fighters go through, unless you're in there donating your time, wrapping their hands and sacrificing and doing it step by step, you're not going to do it. And I always tell them, if you do it for the money, you do it for the wrong reasons, because very, very few people in this industry, in my industry, make money.
It's interesting now because we've seen the UFC come so far, and in the last, say, 5 or 6 years, we've seen people join the UFC as fighters who want to be fighters because of the fame and the celebrities. And now you're, a celebrity cut man, and now people want to come in, and now they want to be cut men. Yeah. But it's not that simple, is it?
No, it's not. It takes years. Listen, I've been doing this for 30 years, man, and it's been the last 13 years that success has really come, and really not even that, because when we first started with the UFC, we're doing 4, 5, 6 fights a year, right. But through the growth of the UFC and me doing more fights, then the sponsors took notice and realized that I wasn't a bad billboard, and they offered me some opportunities to wear their colors and work in the fights, and it became a full-time job for me.
And as far as when it comes to people who want to be a cut man, I mean, you manage a team of guys that, like I said, are all quite senior. You guys have been around for a while. I don't see a lot of new blood when it comes to the cuts. Is that something that, because you want that experience, do you ever keep your eye on like a 30-something-year-old and you're like, maybe, a few more years I might take you on? Or what do you think about new talent?
Well, you know what? There's, surprisingly enough, there's the UFC starting to bring in new cut men now. I think we have a stable of about 12 guys. One girl, and just did the last fights, and but these guys are young, and the point is when you get a big cut, are they going to be able to handle that? they wrap a good hand, but are you going to be able to use the psychology? The only way to learn, because there's no school for this, is to be in the trenches and doing it. And if we could sit there and supervise them and help them grow through our education and giving them the education, the knowledge that we have, then I think it's going to be better for the whole sport. And bottomly, at the end of the day, somebody asked me, what do you want to leave as a legacy? Well, here's what I want to leave, Brian, is that I made this game better and safer. Bottom line is by educating. And when I was learning to be a cut man, I was at a boxing event in Richmond, California, and this one guy did a very good job in the cut. And I went and asked him after the fights. I said, look, I'm trying to be a cut man. What did you do? And he basically says, F you, man. I'm taking this to my grave, and you got to do the same thing. And I got a little embarrassed, but at that point, that gave me the road that I wanted to take, and it wasn't the road that he told me to take. My job was to go out there and educate people, and to make that sour story sweet. I worked with Livingstone Bramble, which was a WBA 130-pound champ. He beat Boom Boom Mancini in the 80s. That was his claim to fame. Anyway, we fought in the Bay Area, and who was the coach was that guy that told me to F off. And now that he sees me in my status, him and his son want to take pictures with me. So I knew in the game of mental war that I beat him.
Are cutmen like fighters, as in they might be a great cutman in the gym between sparring rounds, but when you stick them out in front of all the lights where the pressure's on and they got 55 seconds, they might tense up. They might not do all the right things. I mean, do you guys have to train like the fighters do?
No, and that's a very good question. It's never been asked, but no, you really can't train. I mean, you can't predict when a cut's going to happen. And when it happens, you're going to have to kind of mimic what you've seen and or what you've done that has been successful and work it. But when wrapping hands, I always tell guys that are learning how to wrap hands is wrap as many hands as you can and wrap your own hands, because that way you get to know the tension. You get to feel the tension where the fighter says it's too tight around here or too tight around the thumb. If you wrap your own hands, you'll know that feeling and you'll know how to adjust it. But when it comes to working cuts, unfortunately, it's just you got to be in the trenches, man, and hope you do the right thing.
All right, let's talk career-defining cuts. Forrest Griffin versus Shogun. He's got a mean, nasty cut on his head. Was it first round that happened?
I think so, yeah.
And, I think everyone sees this cut. They don't know what's going to happen. I think Dana White's not sure what's going to happen. You go in, and, we know what happened later. He choked him out in the 4th or 5th round. Right. It was a war. But you have to close this cut. Boom, you got 55 seconds. Do you feel nervous? Do you know exactly what you're going to do? What happens?
Yeah, well, let me get back to the Stephan Bonner Forrest Griffin fight first, okay? Because that was such an epic battle, and I remember Forrest when these guys first came out, they were babies, right? Well, that was such an epic fight, and both these guys are bleeding and all that, and I work on Forrest, and he ends up winning the fight, and well, before the decision, one of his trainers, we're standing there waiting for the decision, and one of his trainers says, Stitch, I'm not gay, man, but I got to give you a kiss. Thanks for taking care of Forrest. That was pretty awesome. So I've always been with Forrest. I'm always trying to take care of him. But that fight with Shogun, he ended up with what we call a star cut, with just so many different angles. He just kind of, zigzagging and all that. And it was down to the bone, man, pretty much a deep cut. I went and used everything that I had, man, and I plugged it up. And I know I'm sitting back. And in fact, that's how my book From the Fields to the Garden starts off, with that story. And but I'm sitting down there, and Dana White's dad's sitting next to me, Don House is sitting next to me, and we're looking at the cut, and it's not bleeding the first round. It's not bleeding the first minute. It's not bleeding the second minute, the third minute, and we're saying, wow, it's not bleeding. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm waiting, I'm in anticipation, and it's not bleeding. And he goes on and wins the fight. And, that was really a pretty signature fight for me. And Forrest enjoyed it so much that he sent me a nice thank you card and a nice little gift to go with that.
I heard that story, and I was surprised, because a lot of fighters would be very thankful in the moment, but a few days later would probably forget about you. Yeah, He's a very loyal guy.
Very loyal. Well, Joe Stevenson, we did a fight, and Joe wasn't making no money. And I wrapped his hands, and he wanted to give me a tip. I said, no. And he insisted, and he reached in his pocket and just pulled out what he had and gave it to me. And I counted it was like $68. I said, but and it wasn't it's not the money factor. It's, but it was a trip.
And you gave Forrest that one more round, and
I gave him that one more round.
and the win basically.
And the win.
If he didn't have the chance, he wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, that's the kind of fight where a doctor would stop. Because you're dealing with optical damage, you're dealing with nerve damage, but more importantly, you're dealing with blood getting into the eyes, right where that cut was at. So
what did you do to get that cut? You said you usually have 3 tools. You got the adrenaline, you got a couple other
anticoagulants. There's Avitine is authorized also. I don't use it that much anymore because I'm using Quick Aid, but Avitine is very expensive. It's more like a cotton candy. My wife says it's more like a cotton candy type of texture, and it's very hard to work with, but it's a coagulant. And in boxing, you would see guys put it there, and you'll see cotton there, but once you hit it, it comes off and it takes the clot with it. That's the only problem with that. But I kind of rolled it up and it fit in that cut like a glove. And then I always mix adrenaline and Vaseline together as a final topical. And when I covered it up, man, it was like a Picasso. It worked out great. But what I did first is I applied the adrenaline on the cut, close up the blood vessels. I put the Avitine, I plugged it up with the Avitine, and then I covered it with the Vaseline adrenaline mix. And yeah, it was a Picasso. And that was the picture that was on the cover of the first video game, I think.
Right, yeah, you told me it was that and that cut.
Yeah.
You do you have a pre-fight routine? You're working the UFC tomorrow. I remember hearing an interview a long time ago, and you said something about how you ironed your shirt or something.
Yeah.
You had like a ritual, and I remember thinking at the time, why is he worried about his shirt? That seems like the last thing to worry about. But for you, it seems like you have this ritual, and I was wondering if you could tell us what it is and why.
Yeah, wrinkled clothes to me is my biggest pet peeve, number one. You see look, I just got off the plane. My clothes are still pretty good. Yours are all right.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? It's a discipline thing that I do. But before I leave the house, whether I'm traveling to fights in Las Vegas or coming to London, I'll pull out everything that I have together, and I make sure I have 21 swabs. I make sure that I have enough gauze and tape. I make sure that the Vaseline adrenaline mix that I have is fresh and enough. I go through all the checklist, and I do that systematically, and that's when I leave. But when I get to this area in the morning, I'll iron my clothes. I always iron my clothes. And as a matter of fact, my son for Christmas bought me a steamer. It works like an iron, but it's steam. And it's like taking them to the cleaners, man. So but I'll iron them because, the way I look at it is if you look good, you feel good, and you perform good. And that's what I'll do, And now I have all the Cutmen ironing their stuff. And I'll kind of look at them, but they all do now. But you have to look professional. You're in the A level, and I remember I worked with a girl kickboxer years ago, Frida Gibbs, I think was her name, and she was fighting for a world title, and I'm working as her cut man, and they get this other guy that they're using to work the corner, and he reaches in his bag and he brings out a satin cornerman jacket, and it's all wrinkled, and I don't know who this guy is, but I told him, I said, man, you can't wear that. This girl's going out there and fighting on TV for a world title and all that, and you can't embarrass her wearing like that. I made him take it off. Yeah.
I think it presents that whole image, and like what you do is you give fighters confidence, and they have to know that you're taking care of your business. Sure. So it's everything, right?
No,
it's an image about yourself.
Absolutely, man.
And it's presented everything. Now, tomorrow when you're wrapping these guys' hands up, I guess around 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock?
I don't even know what time the fight starts.
Okay, yeah. I don't either. But I heard that you offer a tap-out wrap or a knockout wrap. Is that true?
It is.
And these are different wraps that the fighters can choose from.
Yeah. The tap out wrap. Let's go in the knockout wrap. I'll secure it a little bit more. If you got a guy that's going to go out there and really more of a banger, then I'm going to lock his hands up a little bit more and a little bit more, tape on the wrist and kind of tighten it up a little bit more. The tap out wrap, give him a little bit more flexibility and all that. So there's 2 of them.
Johnny Hendricks said after that GSP fight that he kind of wished he had a bit more tape on his hand. Did you hear him say that? Did you wrap his hand? And did you know what he meant?
I knew what he meant because I've always wrapped Johnny Hendricks' hands, but I wasn't at that fight.
See,
and I'm not going to be at this next one. I didn't get that assignment. But I've always wrapped Johnny Hendricks' hands, and he's never had no problems. In fact, he's knocked people out. But I know what he meant. And I know exactly what he meant.
He just needed a little bit more tape
A little
on
bit
there.
more secure, and a little bit maybe, yeah.
Because he was feeling it when he was throwing those punches, and he was thinking, I might be breaking a knuckle or something next. Do you see a day where there aren't any more broken hands if you can get a wrap right or get the technology right? Because you're using technology that was used 50 years ago. It's gauze and tape.
Man, that's a great question. But you know what? And that's what I tell Cutman. That's what I tell fighters. A good wrap does not guarantee you won't break your hands. It minimizes the possibility of you breaking your hands, but especially in this sport here, even boxing. I mean, guys in boxing break their hands, but let's talk about the MMA industry. The gloves are so much smaller, and a lot of these guys, if you notice when they break their hands, or you ask them when they break their hands, they're throwing hooks on top of the head at this angle, and when you're hitting at this angle, you don't have no support. If you're punching straight, you got all this supporting you, but if you're hitting at this angle, all the pressure goes this way, which is going to collapse the metacarpals or the knuckles or something like that. So, I would hope that the technology gets better, in the gloves or, I mean, I don't know how you could change the technology in the wraps. I don't know.
Are you always trying to make your wrap better? Are you always trying little things or getting ideas in the middle of the night?
Yeah, and I still practice on myself. Ask my son, practice on him all the time, but yeah, there's always room for improvement, and there's always little angles, and every fighter, there's 90% of the time, the basic wrap that I have works for everybody. But there's the 10% that wants it changed here, wants it tweaked here. Some guys don't like the thumb. Some guys, they have problems with their metacarpals from injuries before, and I got to lock it in and all that. So there's adjustments that I make for each one of these fighters. But there's that basic wrap that, like Amir Khan, when I go wrap his hands, I'll give him the basic wrap and then make an adjustment off of that. So yeah, there's always room for growth. I'm always learning. My wife and I were talking about just today, actually, last night when I came on I still study corners, and even if it's a 4-round fight, with the guy's making his professional boxing debut, I'm checking out the corners, still studying.
Seeing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they're doing, what they're not doing.
Absolutely.
What the cut guys are doing, or what the coaches
what the
are
cut
doing?
guys are doing.
Okay.
Shoot, all fights that have already happened, I'll fast forward the fights because I've seen so many fights.
Go to
right?
the cuts.
And I'll go straight to the corner. So watching a fight would take me 15 minutes, just in between rounds. Yeah, that's what I do.
Talk to me about boxing versus MMA. You're one of the few guys that is in both worlds. There's not many people that really swim in the circles with the champions, the Klitschkos, and the champions of MMA. Yeah. What's it like, watching them two evolve differently? We hear all about, the fighter pay being maximum for the boxers. Then you've seen MMA come along. What are your thoughts in general on boxing versus MMA?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. And let me just kind of answer it this way because, me working with boxers and me working in the MMA industry, you hear a lot of guys in boxing saying, these guys don't get paid nothing. But in reality, it's if you take 1% of the fighters, they say 1% of the fighters make 99% of the money in boxing. But if you take away the Mayweathers, the Klitschkos, the Andre Wards, these top echelon guys, and you compare the other guys in boxing compared to what these other guys in MMA are making, these guys in MMA are making a lot more money. You could have a 10-round fight in boxing and still make 15 grand. Some guys are making $8,000 to $10,000, and where you could have a 3-round fight here, and these guys are making 15 to show and 15 to win. And then if you get a knockout bonus, tap out bonus, fight of the night bonus, it's an additional 50 grand. But one thing that MMA has that boxing doesn't have is sponsors for the fighters. And if you notice, I think Andre Ward has Jordan, but very few guys in boxing have sponsors like the guys in MMA. So that's a big misconception right there. Take that 1% out of the way, and I think MMA is doing a lot better. But I years ago I produced a documentary called Boxer's Nightmare, and it deals with all the hardships at that time before the UFC came around, the hardships that fighters go through, and that's where that 1% make 99% of the money. But keep in mind, in boxing, a majority of the fighters have less than a high school diploma. And I know because I send out some surveys and I got all this information as feedback. A majority of these fighters have less than a high school diploma, where opposed in the MMA industry, a lot of these guys have college degrees. So there's a differential there. And but I think this, in the same token, this survey reaches both the same way, is a majority of these fighters that fight go in there with some type of injury, whether it's a small injury or a big injury. You know, they're bruised up because of their training. And I think it happens in both sports. But that was a very good question.
What are the Klitschkos like? How long have you known them? And what are those guys like?
Well, you know what? They're the best of the best, man. And you know, my storyline is just so great. In 1991, December the 12th, 1991, I'll never forget, when the Soviet Union first broke, we took a team of professional boxers and kickboxers to the Ukraine, to Kiev, to fight the Kievians, I guess it's the Ukrainians. And I had Mark Longo, which was a kickboxer. And so we went over there, and that's the first time I laid eyes on the Klitschkos. I think Vladimir was like 16 years old and Vitaly was 19 and whatever, but they were already big stars. And they were big old pillars, you know. And so that was my first. I never really met them. I got giant posters of them. But years later, when they came to Vegas to train, they were in the gym and everybody came in and they're looking at them and they're all in awe. You can't tell who's who, they're saying. You know, I said, well, yeah, that's Vitaly and that's Vladimir. So during their break, I started talking to them and I told them that I was in Kiev in 1991. And you know, Vitaly Klitschko was a kickboxer. And actually, I used to work with Dennis Alexio, and they both fought in the same card in Las Vegas. I think Vitaly fought Big Brad Hefton. And so when I told them that I was in Kiev and I brought the poster of the guys and they remembered the fighters, that was our first really communications. But, you know, and I spoke to them then, and when Ocean's 11 came, Vladimir is fighting Lennox Lewis in the movie When the Lights Go Out, and I just happened to be Vladimir's Cutman. I don't even mention that movie because I got about this much airtime, but I spent 4 days with Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko. And then down the road, Vladimir had lost his world title to Lehman Brewster, got knocked out, and he was blaming it on being sabotaged and what have you not. So anyway, long story short is I used to co-host a radio show, the 13th Round in Oakland, and me and my buddy Nick Ward are standing watching the people go into the MGM for a big mega fight. And Emmanuel Stewart, which was a commentator for HBO, is walking by in his tuxedo and says, Stitch, I need to talk to you about Vladimir. And he goes like this, and I look at Nick, I said, did you see what I saw? And he said, yeah. Well, the next day, Emmanuel calls me and says, look, would you be interested in working with Vladimir? I said, yeah, why not, man? And and it turns out that Vladimir was asking, I didn't know this till later, Vladimir was asking Emmanuel, get the guy that was my cut man in the movie. Call him. And Emmanuel says, I already got him. So the first fight I worked with Vladimir, it was his first, I guess, second comeback fight, or his first comeback fight after losing to Lehman Brewster. And this was at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And he ended up with a Forrest Griffith cut. And even though it's the type of cut I know I could work on, at that point, he wasn't looking all that good, but I knew he was winning the fight. And when the doctor comes and asks me what I thought about the cut, I opened it up. And I said, well, you know, that's a pretty bad cut. Because at that point, if they went to the scorecards, then he would, you know, it would go to the scorecards. And the way I judged the fight, that he was winning the fight, he ended up winning the fight and heavyweight champ of the world now. But the next day, Dr. Goodman calls and says, you know, I called Vladimir and I called Emmanuel Stewart, and I just want to let you know that the plastic surgeon says it was a good thing that you stopped the cut when you did, because it was close to the optical nerve and it could have created double vision. And like I say, now he's the world champion. Vitaly Klitschko, first time I worked with him is when he came back out of retirement after the big Lennox Lewis fight. And he fought Danny Williams, the guy that knocked out Mike Tyson. But knowing now the colors that I wore then, knowing now is it was special then, but it's even special now, is we wore orange for the Orange Revolution, right, which was the rebellion against the Ukrainian government for corruption and whatnot. And Vitaly has always been a strong component of making sure that they want to change what's going on in the Ukraine. And now, as you could understand, you know, with this fiasco with Putin invading Ukraine. Well, Vitaly's running for president. And, I look at this and when we were in Moscow, when Vladimir fought Alexander Povetkin, I'm sitting down with Vitaly in the lobby, and we're talking, and he's telling me the corruption and what he wants to do. And, he says when his father was a colonel that actually was in Chernobyl. He's the one that commandeered the Chernobyl when they had that leakage, and he ended up dying of cancer. But he says, Vitaly says, the government is supposed to give the widow severance. Well, when the mother went to go look for money, they told her, well, Miss Klitschko, we don't have no money. And, finally this one guy comes and says, Miss Klitschko, come here. I could get you that money, but it's going to cost you 50%. And that was an example, a small example that Vitaly used. But, right now he's running for president, and, I wish him well. And I know that if he gets it, and I think he's favored over everybody, it's going to be a trip, man, working with a world champion that's president.
That's president.
And it's funny because when Vladimir fought, when we fought in Moscow, now Vladimir's more westernized because he's trains with American fighters and Emmanuel Stewart and his team and what have you not. But Vitaly's still more of the Soviet Union stern guy. But at the end, in the dressing room, I'm saying goodbye and all that. And Vitaly looks at me, he says, Stich, I'm not gay, but I love you. And man, Brian, you just don't know how much that meant to me because I know the kind of person. I don't even know if he tells his wife that, but that's the kind of relationship I have with these guys.
You've had that a few times. You did Fedor's hands, and you said he didn't say much to you the whole time.
Fedor, that was one of my greatest moments. I'm still walking on air. I go to wrap his hands in Pride. He had just come back from breaking his thumb, and the promoter asked me if I could wrap his hands, and I was more than happy to. So I'm like you. I'm trying to, like the fighters, I talk to him and try to relax him, and Fedor's not saying anything to me.
Nothing.
And nothing, man. So open and close and open and close. He's not saying nothing. I'm asking him questions. Yeah, and that. So finally, at the end, I finished rapping. I said, "Okay, how they feel?" He goes, "Super. That's all he said, man.
And that was enough.
That was enough, brother. I walked out. I was so happy, man. But what even capped that night off is he had won the fight. And Josh and I are walking back down the hallway back to the bus, and they're partying in his dressing room, and he sees us and comes in and, yeah, you drink, So how many guys have shots of vodka with Fedor? Not once, but 2 or 3 times I've done that. And when he fought for Affliction, he literally invited my son and my wife into the dressing room when all these people are waiting outside trying to get in, and he's putting the belt around my son, taking pictures and all that. So I've had a great relationship with Fedor, and I saw him in Moscow when I was there. So yeah, great relationship.
These male bonding moments are important for you. It seems like that's what keeps you going. I think that's what keeps all men kind of going to a certain extent.
Yeah, well, it's not only male bonding. I've done that with Misha Tate. I've done that with, Ronda Rousey. It's I guess, when you're in the trenches, I guess Kevin Cowley said it best. He's a fighter from way back, and maybe this really says it all. He says, when fighters fight, their souls touch. And I think that's such a true statement. But like say, what I give to the fighters is something that nobody has given them. Nobody can give them but me. And that to me, I think they understand that. And it's an unwritten rule that, Stitch isn't part of my team, but he is part of my team. And Brock Lesnar, when he fought Keith Haring, and I'm putting those gloves on and they rip. He has 4-ounce gloves and, but the bottom line, I'm telling him, I said, that's a nice shirt you have, Brock. And he said, well, I have one for you. I packed one for you. He goes, well, no, I didn't. He says, my wife packed it. Yeah, she's packing my stuff. She says, should I pack one for Stitch? And he says, yeah. And after I finished putting the gloves on, he reached in his bag and gave me a shirt. Those are the moments, that you can't buy those moments.
No.
You can't, and you have to earn those moments, I think. And I think I've earned them.
And those two men, you're talking about Fedor and Brock Lesnar, probably the 2 most private guys in the sport.
Crow Cop.
Crow Cop.
I've broken bread with Crow Cop too, brother.
Okay.
I get the best out of them. Really I do.
That's a serious bond. I guess your souls kind of touch a bit too. Right before.
No, and that's it. And like I said, it's common for these guys to, and these guys are men, and we're men, but for them to give me a kiss and tell me they love me. It's a father-son type of bond, and that's the way I look at these guys. Is they are my children. When they're in the ring, I'm going to take care of them just like I do my children.
How long are you going to be doing this for?
Man, I'm gonna die in the ring, brother. If I'm not capable of physically doing it, and mentally I can still do it, I'm gonna do it to as long as I can. As long as I can make this game better and safer, that's really the bottom line.
Do you are there any physical issues? Do you get arthritis or anything from touching all
Man,
those hands?
my hands are so soft. My wife says I don't even work. But no, you know what? I've been blessed. I'm 62 years old, and I feel healthy, and my knees are great, my back is great, no arthritis, and I think a lot of that is because my hands are always moving, and so I'm blessed.
So you're going to be in there for a while.
Yeah.
What's the greatest MMA moment that you can remember? It was a night, or maybe not necessarily like the Forrest Cut, but just you being there and you were like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah, you know what? I think the craziest moment was our first trip to Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
My first trip to Brazil. Number one, I go through customs, and the custom guy says, "Steve, welcome to Brazil. Bem-vindo Brazil." I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. I'm taking tour with some of the guys up in the jungles, and there's a couple of policemen there, and the guy points at me and goes like this. I said, wow. I'm at the beach, and they got those palapas, and there's a family there, and this lady does again like this. I guess that's the sign that, I know what they mean, So I go over there and I start talking to her, and she pulls out her breast, and she starts breastfeeding her baby right in front of me. And I just kind of walked out, man. But when the fight started in Brazil, the main event, it was so loud. It was buzzing. It was crazy.
You'd never seen anything like that.
I've never heard anything like that. It was crazy, and just the respect I get in Brazil. It's everywhere, but Brazil's really pretty special. But it was buzzing. I mean, it was so loud, it was buzzing.
Talk to me about movies. Talk to me about Sylvester Stallone and doing that whole thing. Do you like doing movies? You almost turned that movie down, right?
I almost turned it down, man. You got to love your wife for what she does. And, the first movie that I did, and you know what, somebody up there's taking care of me, because I'm not a religious guy or anything, but I think I'm a good guy. And when I left R.J. Reynolds, that was a pretty crazy career change for me, from going from a job to no job. But that day that I was leaving, I got a call to do an audition for Play It to the Bone with Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas. And I was working with my manager that day, and I'm nervous. I'm still a working guy. I'm still a disciplined guy. Not that I was going to be working from 8 to 5. And I'm nervous because I have a 3 o'clock interview. And so about 10 o'clock, I tell my manager, I said, look, man, I got an offer to do an interview. He said, I'm just here to sign you out. So I went and did the interview, and I got the job, Play It to the Bone, Woody Harrelson, Antonio Banderas. And that was crazy. And Chuck Bodak, which was my mentor, was the cut man for Banderas. I wanted to be with Banderas because he's Latino, I'm Latino. But Chuck got in front of me. I ended up with Woody Harrelson. But during the movie, the promoter and his trainer are saying, don't worry about it, you got the best cut man in the business. And Chuck Bodak is saying, man, you got all the cuts. Well, it happened that way. But then I did I did Ocean's 11,
right.
But then Rocky Balboa. I got a call to do the Rocky Balboa movie. And at that time, I was working with Fabrice Tioza, was a cruiserweight champ out of France. He had a fight in France. And then the week after, I was going to work with Audley Harrison, which was the Olympic gold medalist from England, that was going to fight here in London. And I turned it down because the money factor there was pretty good. And I called my wife at work, and I told her, I got offered a role in the Rocky movie, but I turned it down. She goes, are you crazy? Because Rocky's an American icon. And I thought about it, Brian, and at that point I was sending Audley Harrison's people an email on the monies and everything, all the particulars of me working this fight. And I sat down for about 30 seconds in front of the computer, man, and I deleted it. And I said, you know what, I got to think of myself. And I let them know, and they understood. And it turns out that Tioza's fight in France got canceled anyway. But Stallone says, I brought you in there to do what you do. Just do what you do. And what an honor. Working with him, I saw he's a master director, he's a master writer, and he's a master actor. And so, yeah, I mean, how many guys play in the Rocky movie? I did. And then I just finished up the one with Kevin James and Salma Hayek and Henry Winkler, Boss Rutan, Mark Delagrati, all these guys. I played myself in there where Kevin James was saying, oh, Stitch, I can't believe you're working on me. You know, I'm a big fan of yours. And, you know, it's funny because in the script says I go and I work on, he says, he gives me those accolades, which is $1 million plug, right? And I work on them and I smile and walk away. But Kevin James is saying, well, you know what, we got to have you say something. So I brought up the idea, well, what if I say, welcome to the UFC? Ah, that's great. You know, so that's the line that I used, but he didn't know I was going to slap him. So as he's giving me the accolade stitch, I can't believe you're working on me and this and that and so, and I clean him up. I said, well, welcome to the UFC. Well, first I go, bam, well, welcome to the UFC. He didn't know I was slapping. Nobody knew I was going to slap him. Everybody started laughing. And Kevin James says, oh, that's a take, man. You know, so that's my little part with Here Comes the Boom.
And you got more movies coming up.
Well, you know what?
If they come.
Well, you know what? I met Edward James Olmos, one of my, you know, fan favorites, his Hollywood favorite. And when Anderson Silva fought Chris Weidman the first time, and he was there because him and Anderson were making a movie together, tentatively making a movie together. Okay. But Olmos said at that time that I want you to be in the movie also. But he got knocked out, so I don't know. So I don't know what happened with that movie. But you know what? I told my wife, and this is the way things happen. If I mention it, it does come true. But I told her I'm ready for another movie. So you heard it here first on Lemon Reel.
Edward James Olmos, I think if you're old enough to watch those early Miami Vices, which means you're probably in your 40s or 50s or 60s, then you have to give that man much respect.
Oh, plenty, great actor. He's an American Me. I mean, all the Mexicans, all the Latinos watch him as America, the gangster, the gang member in American Me.
Right.
Yeah.
What is it like representing Latinos? Is it something you've always done? Is it difficult? What is it like?
It's a big honor, man. It's a major honor. And, you know, coming back from where I grew up at, last year I was a keynote speaker for our high school. It was 3 towns, and I think 78 kids graduated. And a majority of them, you know, their families fall below the poverty level, but I was a keynote speaker. I just got an offer to go to Cleveland, and for Cinco de Mayo is to be a keynote speaker for the city, for the Hispanic kids over there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a true honor. Really it is. And I think, you know, this is something I like doing, and it's nice to give back, and it makes me feel real good.
What do you expect when the UFC goes to Mexico?
I expect to be there.
Okay.
You know, I expect to be there, but no, I thought, you know what, and it's that's a good point, because when I first started with the UFC, the only Latinos that were really involved with the UFC, and I'm talking about fans and participants, is Tito Ortiz, Rico Rodriguez, and me. Okay. There were nobody fans. No Latins were watching the fights. Now you go, they're going to be in Dallas next week. I bet you 3/4 of those will be Mexicans.
3/4.
Latins. Yeah, absolutely. And I go to fights all the time now, and they're all Latins. So the Latin community has really soaked up the mixed martial arts, the UFC. And I guess from what I understand, I'm pretty well recognized back home. I know my aunts and uncles and cousins, they acknowledge that they love seeing me on TV. So, you know, be curious to see what Mexico City is going to be like.
That's going to be an interesting vibe. It's going to be so unique, you know. It's hasn't really been done there on that scale. So
never has, yeah.
That'll be interesting.
So, and they have Cain Velasquez as the main event. Be sick.
That'd be sick. Yeah. How do you keep a family life when you're doing this kind of UFC schedule? I mean, we had John Anik in here a year ago, and he was telling me his schedule. I was like, are you kidding me? You know, he's in Brazil 7 or 8 times that year, flying around, you know, Buffer in and out, you're in and out. How do you keep it together?
Well, you know, for the most part, Monday through Thursdays, I'm home. You know, it's just the weekend travels. We call them the circus travel. You know, you get there on Friday, do the fight Saturday, and we're home on Sunday. But Monday through Thursdays, I spend all my time with my family. You know, I'm not a party guy. I don't go out partying and this and that. You know, my family has sacrificed so much for me. My wife in particular, my kids in particular. You know, just, you know, who would take a $25,000 cut and pay, and your wife says, do it, follow your dreams. But they've sacrificed so much for me that everything I do for them. You know, I'm not into material things or anything like that, and you know, it's all family. You know, even my mother and my brothers, they're all proud of me of doing what I do, you know, but yeah, everything is for my family.
You know, everyone that comes on the show, I ask them the same question kind of towards the end of our interview, and I'm going to ask you the same question.
Sure.
If you could pick up the phone and make a phone call to the 20-year-old Jacob Duran and give that young man a bit of advice, what would you tell him?
Wow, that's a good question, man. The 20-year-old Jacob Duran, I had just joined the Air Force. and I joined the Air Force because I didn't know where I was going. Like say I walked off of playing baseball. I was in spring training. I left. I left, and matter of fact, I had a friend of mine that was a pitcher that ended up pitching for the Houston Nationals, and I saw him play when he played the Giants in San Francisco, and he says, "Where'd you go?" So at that point, I had no direction. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I always knew that I wanted to be a professional in something. What I would tell Jacob, the 20-year-old Jacob, is follow your dreams, brother. They do come true.
You say that, follow your dreams.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, hey, listen, you know what? It's follow your dreams. They do come true. I mean, it's something that, don't be scared to fail, man. And don't be scared. I mean, I've been kicked and beat, and everybody has been successful. There's that formula to being successful, and it's treating people well. You remember Randall Cunningham?
No.
Okay, he was a quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. Good example. And I learned so much off of this little tidbit that he gave me. Is me and my brothers after a kickboxing event. In fact, when Vitaly fought, Brad Hefton and Dennis Alexia fought that night, we were talking to him, and he was a big football player. And we're nobodies at that point. And one of Don King's guys comes up to him and says, "Hey, Randall, I need to talk to you." He says, "Hold on, let me finish talking to these guys." And I thought that was so honorable on his part that, I always tell people, respect people and, be nice to people. And, I tell my kids it's so much easier being nice than it is being an asshole. But, go after, if it's not going to kill you, go after it. And, don't be scared of, I tell people, look, man, you can try 20, 30 different things. And if one of them sticks, that's the one you got to stay with.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
God. Well, the best advice, maybe the best comment. Can I give you the best comment I've had?
Yeah.
Chuck Bodak, when I did Play It to the Bone, he's a 90-year-old man. He's 85 at that time, and he was my mentor. He's a guy that you used to see with the tape on his forehead and all that. It was his birthday party, and we all signed the cornerman jackets, and Antonio Banderas and Woody Harrelson and everybody, and we presented it to Chuck Bodak in the middle of the ring. And Chuck Bodak says, "When I retire, the next great cutman in the business is going to be this." He says, when I cash in my chips, the next best cutman in the business is going to be that guy. And I'm at the bottom of the ring looking up, and he gave me that quote. That's been the best I've ever had.
And that inspired you in a big way.
That inspired me big time because he was my mentor. Yeah.
Last bit of advice on that question is to the 20-year-old that's listening to us all around the world. Maybe they're in China, maybe they're in Australia or Brazil. What advice do you give them if they want to, I don't know, one day be part of the UFC or one day follow in your shoes? What should they be doing?
You got to put in some time. You have to put in some time and don't do it for the money. I mean, that's really the whole key. I think when you did your thing, you went from big numbers into interviewing people because of a passion. You have to have a passion for what you want to be successful at, and do it from your heart, man, because that's really what's going to guide you.
So true. I think about that so often. If you ever see someone doing something great, they're obviously doing it because it's something that they must pursue, for a passion, and all the trappings come with it. You must see that with the fighters, with the true greats, they're doing it because they love doing it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They love doing it, man.
And you see that every weekend, right? In the cage.
Every weekend I see it, brother, and I mean, we'll walk out to the arena and like I say, every moment's a different moment, but you see some of it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times, but that one extra moment, that's a special moment that I look for. That's what I live for.
Stitch, thanks so much for coming here. You transcend the sport in so many ways. I was thinking of the roster of the people I've had in here involved with the UFC and commentators and fighters and referees, but some way I was like, well, how come Stitch is the most special? And I don't know. You kind of represent that sport in a way that you do with honor and respect, and I don't know, people are really drawn to you for some reason. I guess you're used to it kind of by now. Yeah,
well, maybe because I take care of them, brother.
Yeah.
Maybe I give them that one more round, but yeah, it's a respect factor, I think, and that whole saying is you have to earn it. You just can't go out there and buy it, and you have to be the person that you are all the time, and treat everybody the way you like to be treated, and really that's a strong statement. But taking care of my babies, man, that's what these guys are.
I have this weird theory I've been working on lately, and I think ultimately that when you boil it all down, that all of us are really looking from each other as humans is just that little bit of respect.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, if you take away the money and the awards and the belts and everything, I think we all want a connection and a little bit of respect from someone else. And
That's it. That you've accomplished your own mission. And the fighters. And it's really for them not even a win or lose situation. It's, you know what, you did it. You got into the octagon. You took a shot. You gave a shot. You're a full-time fighter now, brother. You marked yourself down as a fighter. And very few people could do that.
Right.
And same with us. We're growing into what we do. This is what, your third year, and look where you're at now. Where are you going to be at 10 years from now? I'm going to say, dang, I was on the Brian Rose show in his 143rd show or something like that. But keeping it real, London is real.
Thank you, Stitch. You're right up there with the top guests I've had, whether it's, Nelson Mandela's prison guard or Neil deGrasse Tyson. You're right up there. And I just really love the message and everything you stand for. So thanks so much. People can follow you on Twitter, right? At
Yes.
Stitch Duran.
At Stitch Duran.
They can get your book on Amazon, From the Fields to the Garden.
Yes.
That's the Madison Square Garden, right? That's the
Right.
reference there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told you the story. I did tell you the story. Yeah. But that was it. I grew up in the fields, and my goal was to make it to Madison Square Garden, and I did. So that's where the name From the Fields to the Garden came from.
That's a fantastic title. As we say on London Real, it's about the journey. Stitch, I wish you well in yours, and thanks so much for coming.
Well, thank you for everything.
All right, take care. This week on London Real, we have Nelson Mandela's prison guard, Christo Brand.
When I arrived on Robben Island, we was informed we're going to meet the biggest criminals in the history of South Africa. I didn't know about Nelson Mandela at all, never heard the name before. African prisoners like Mandela was called boys. They only get short trousers, short sleeves, sandals. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, is it possible just to see the child through the window? I said, Mandela is not allowed. When I observed him, I see a disciplined man. I see a man which was quite intelligent. This was my prison warder. This guy was my friend on Robben Island.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela.
There was a lot of whites when Mandela was released. Said, no, why they released this man? He should have died in prison. But after a few years he's in power. That same people said when he stepped down, why they not kept Mandela longer in power?
On Sunday, London Real presents Nelson Mandela's prison guard.
He mentioned me as his friend when he introduced me to people. But he feels more like a father to me.